So to talk even to go in more, I think, into more detail even on that, the human cost
Mhm.
of things is that there's a cost to the individual, there's a cost to communities that people are noticing now. You mentioned Indiana earlier, where I was born and bred. I spent the first 29 years of my life there, and my family's still there. And in our what used to be the small town of Lebanon, Indiana, they're getting one of these major meta data centers, and there's
Oh yeah.
concern about the water usage, energy usage. But even beyond that, there is what that is even going to lead to more than that is more, we just had a lot of tech companies do and social media companies do a series of layoffs of thousands of employees.
Mhm.
I think one of the companies admitted it was because we have AI to do their job now. I don't think the others have officially said that.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things that you mentioned in an article you wrote called BS Jobs that I thought was really key is you quoted David Graeber, who connected meaning to the pleasure of being the cause. And
What a
you,
great phrase that is, by the
yeah,
way.
Yeah.
well, it's so
So
true. And
yeah.
it's one of those things that like is at the root of who we are, created in the image of a creator. Um, the pleasure of being the cause, the pleasure of being able to, point to something and, I did this thing. I went out and mowed the lawn, and my wife was happy with me for mowing the lawn, and
Mhm.
and you can see the end result. So there's not only that's taking over jobs, but as we seed more and more of our creative output to that, you mentioned it earlier too with doing a painting, even if it's not the best painting in the world, there's something meaningful about a human doing it. Reading poetry, there's something meaningful to me. If I knew a poem was written by AI and it was technically better, I would much rather hear the bad poem written by someone who actually felt the things that they were writing about.
Mhm.
What are we? I wonder if you can speak about just that idea of what we're losing when we cede our work to AI, especially our creative work, and we lose the pleasure of being the cause. Because one thing, and maybe to spur on some thought here too, one of the books that I enjoyed from a couple years ago was, and I've mentioned it a few times on the show, was Joseph Minich's Bulwarks of Unbelief, and he talked about the impact of technology and techno-culture on how we viewed ourselves, and it actually led to this rise of atheism because we started to feel like we lived in a godless universe just by our interaction with the technology around us and the story it told us about ourselves and the connection of ourselves and work. So yeah, maybe talk about that a little bit, because I think that is just like one of the most profound pieces of this
Yeah.
of our connection to work that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thanks. So I love teaching essays from David Graeber because he was an agnostic, anarchist anthropologist. He was involved in like the Occupy Wall Street movement. But I would teach him my theology classes, and I put him alongside like G.K. Chesterton and John Paul II, the Pope, because so he would like to talk about like brain scans of prisoners in solitary confinement, and like the importance of a Montessori environment where like children learn how to handle things, and like just like um, yeah, so like it's fundamental. So if we're creating the image and likeness of God, God is fundamentally love. That's the most important thing. We're created in and for relationships of love.
Mhm.
We're created to know the truth. Yeah, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life.
Mhm.
And so being able to participate in God's act of creation. The doctrine of continuous creation. Like it's easy to think of like, oh, well, like God set things up and then he knocked over the first domino and it all happened. That's Enlightenment deism. That's not what Christians believe.
Right.
Christians believe that at every moment God is holding the world in his love. He's continuously creating it. That to exist is to be held by God in love. And so like Chesterton has this beautiful line about it's like God says to the sun every morning, do it again.
Yeah.
And there's another glorious sunrise, and God delights in it like a child delights in the sunrise, and like a
Mhm.
child delights in just like kicking his legs, or yeah, my 3-year-old son just tumbles nonstop because it's amazing to just to have a body and to move it in the world and
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
what can happen.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, so that I think that ties into the theology of work and like all the concerns about UBI and robots replacing us, because in Genesis we see yes, Adam has to work by the sweat of his brow after the fall, but before the fall, he's told to steward the garden. But he's told that he has responsibility for naming the animals, for getting to know all the for taking care of the garden. And so work has both this like objective value, and this is drawing on John Paul II, the Pope. So work is an objective value, like a market value that people assign to it, society takes for it, but also as a subjective value, a personal value. And actually, like the way in which work makes you grow and develop your capacity, the way in which work allows you to participate in God's creation, is more important than the monetary value of what you do. And that's why like there's no work that needs to be done that's genuinely beneath the dignity of a person. That's why like having so like we need to respect the worker regardless of what their job is, unless the job is something intrinsically evil, in which case society shouldn't allow that job to exist. And so that again, an agnostic anthropologist like Graeber could kind of get that insight. That's something that should be more intuitive to Christians. Is something that it's great to say.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important part of this conversation, especially as people of faith we're talking. I think the important communication to the public is we're not arguing necessarily just from Christianity about something. And I look at this particular issue that we're facing now as a Christian. Of course I do. But for me, it's not arguing from Christianity. In one sense, it's arguing to it, because everyone sees the problem. You have an agnostic thinker who's seeing the problem and the lowering of our sense of value or worth. It's not lowered if I believe that a God objectively exists. The fact that I don't feel valuable doesn't mean that I'm not valuable. It just means that I don't feel it. And so I think that the current problem exists in a self-perception thing. That's why the whole idea of reality collapse, which was this, by the way, the reason why it's even in the title of the book is because Asa Raskin and Tristan Harris mentioned it for 1.5 seconds in the entirety of their 1 hour discussion on the AI dilemma. And they had all these things that are great and all these things that are possibly, perils of AI. And reality collapse was one among 40. And I'm like, that's the headline. The other ones are the rubrics underneath it. That's not the thing. So, but this perception of ourselves is something I think that is, we're in danger of sort of losing that sense, because, in that will AI be alive in part 2, you're talking, you talk about Iain McGilchrist, who I saw did a fascinating conversation on consciousness on Justin Brierley's unbelievable dialogue, moderated dialogues, but quoting that idea of true intelligence is not just, sort of the left-brained, analytical understanding, categorization, and all these things of various concepts in a bureaucratic organization and understanding of certain things, but also that right-brained understanding of the depth of what it means to experience and be in an experiential situation with the data you're actually processing, and intelligence as the including the ability to savor what is true, good, and beautiful. What risks do we take in losing that sense the more we use AI to do our thinking for us, or collate the data, or write the code, or whatever it is we use it for? What risks do we take in losing that true sense of that right-brainedness of what it means to be human?